your energy unmasks their lies. Carl Jung on envy and empaths. As Carl Jung once said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But what happens when your very presence, your peace, your empathy, your authenticity irritates others because it reflects back the truth they try to hide? If you've ever walked into a room and felt an invisible shift, or sensed a hidden resentment behind a smile, this message is for you. Your energy doesn't just enter a space, it exposes what's lurking beneath the surface. In today's video, we'll explore how being an empath makes you a mirror for other people's unconscious envy and projections. So before we dive in, comment below. Have you ever felt someone smiling at you, but secretly resenting you? Let's open up the conversation, because your story might be the light someone else needs. 1. The empath's gift is a wound. Transformed. Empaths are not simply sensitive people. They are alchemists of pain. They emerge from childhood not untouched, but transformed by emotional wounds that taught them how to read between the silences. When love was conditional, they learned to attune themselves to shifts in tone, to absorb moods before words were even spoken. This survival instinct matured into a rare spiritual gift, the ability to feel others deeply, to intuit what lies beneath the surface. Yet what begins as a coping mechanism becomes a radiant presence, and this presence, rooted in spiritual awakening, is both a blessing and a burden in a world addicted to illusion. The empath's energy doesn't just comfort, it confronts. It stirs what others have buried. It unearths what's been denied. And in doing so, it reveals a truth few are ready to face. Your light exposes their shadow. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is the paradox of the empath. Their existence brings the unconscious to light not through confrontation, but through resonance. They reflect back to others what they are unwilling to confront in themselves. That reflection can feel like love or threat, depending on how awake the other soul is. For those still wearing emotional masks, the empath becomes unbearable, not because they do harm, but because they do nothing to maintain the illusion. Their stillness becomes a mirror. Their authenticity becomes a siren. They don't need to argue, compete, or dominate. Their mere presence destabilizes false power dynamics. The spiritual wisdom they embody disrupts the energetic equilibrium of relationships built on control or performance. And this is where envy creeps in, not the kind that desires your gifts, but the kind that resents your existence, especially from those who claim to love you. They may admire your empathy in words, but reject your truth in practice. Because your ability to sense what is unspoken, to name the undercurrents others try to dismiss, makes you both magnetic and dangerous. It is a psychological and spiritual confrontation, and most are not ready. Instead of evolving, they recoil. Instead of owning their projections, they blame you. The empath becomes the scapegoat, the problem, the one who's too sensitive, when in reality, they are simply unwilling to pretend. Your presence exposes their performance, and in doing so, you become the enemy of their illusion. In modern life, where emotional disconnection is normalized and attention is currency, your spiritual clarity feels like rebellion. You begin to realize that you were never too much. You were simply in too many spaces that could not handle truth. Relationships built on pretense will crumble in your presence, not because you want them to, but because your soul is allergic to falsehood. This is your awakening. It is not meant to be comfortable. It is meant to be clarifying. The gift that once isolated you is the same one that now sets you free. You see through people, and that power makes you unforgettable. So honor your energy. Let those who envy it fall away. And remember, you were never meant to be understood by those still hiding from themselves. 2. Envy masquerades as love. Those who claim to love you but secretly feel discomfort around your presence are often not reacting to you. They're reacting to the light you carry. Carl Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But when people are not ready for that understanding, your light becomes a threat. Unlike jealousy, which at least acknowledges value and seeks to possess it, envy carries a more corrosive energy. It doesn't want what you have. It wants to destroy what makes you radiant. For the empath, this becomes an invisible battleground. Your emotional intelligence, your spiritual wisdom, your ability to feel deeply and speak truthfully exposes the illusions others live by. You become a mirror they didn't ask for, a reflection of what they've denied, repressed, or abandoned within themselves. Your very existence challenges their comfort zone. And so, they resent you, but in ways they cannot even admit to themselves. Envy often wears the mask of love. It hides behind praise laced with subtle criticism. It cloaks itself in support that feels strangely conditional. It shows up in moments where your joy is met with silence, your ideas are dismissed, or your boundaries are seen as rejection. These are not accidents. This is unconscious envy, leaking through cracks in the false self. Carl Jung reminds us that what we repress does not disappear. It returns in distorted form. In the empath's world, this means those who are closest to you may unconsciously resent the very qualities they claim to admire. You are not just a person to them. You are a symbol of emotional freedom, truth, clarity. And if they haven't yet claimed those parts of themselves, they will either worship you, sabotage you, or try to dull you down. The tragedy is that many empaths confuse this dynamic with real love. Because they feel deeply, they assume others do too. But love without self-awareness turns into possession. Connection without reflection becomes control. You must learn to recognize when the bond is no longer nourishing, but draining. When the words don't match the energy. When you leave a conversation feeling smaller, more confused, less alive. These are signs that someone's unconscious envy is at work, and your spiritual awakening is trying to tell you the truth. That your energy is not too much. It's too honest, too clear, too unfiltered. It cuts through emotional masks like a blade of light, and not everyone is ready for that. When you begin to trust your sensitivity as intelligence, you stop second-guessing yourself. You stop trying to prove your worth to people who are secretly triggered by it. You stop dimming your light to keep their shadows intact. You realize that your presence alone reveals what others are trying to hide from themselves and from you. And that is not your burden to carry. Your task is not to heal their discomfort. Your task is to walk in truth, with discernment, with grace, with the quiet strength that comes from knowing your soul is not here to be liked. It's here to be real. And realness will always unmask the lie. 3. Envy hides in subtle sabotage. Envy doesn't always strike with obvious hatred. It moves in silence, hiding behind soft smiles and subtle sabotage. You feel it in the dismissive jokes that undercut your deepest truths, in the way someone withdraws their support just when you need it most, in the way they mock your emotional depth and call you too sensitive, like it's an insult instead of a gift. These wounds don't come from strangers. They come from those who say they love you, and that's what makes them so confusing, so disorienting. You begin to question your perception, your feelings, your very reality, because how could someone who claims to care also be the one causing your emotional erosion? Carl Jung taught that what is unconscious in others gets projected onto those who carry light. When you are on a path of spirituality and spiritual development, you become a mirror. Your energy reflects back everything they are unwilling to face. You don't have to say a word. Your presence alone unravels their mask. And so, rather than celebrate you, they criticize your passion, minimize your pain, or ignore your evolution. Not because you're wrong, but because your growth reminds them of their stagnation. The empath, attuned to the invisible threads of emotional energy, often walks into rooms already knowing too much. You sense the tension before anyone speaks, feel the resentment behind their smile, hear the unspoken jealousy beneath their praise. It is not your imagination. Their envy cloaks itself in polite silence or performative support, but your spirit knows. Your light agitates the shadows they haven't dealt with, and instead of thanking you for holding up a mirror, they resent you for it. They pull back, not because you are too much, but because you reflect back the parts of themselves they are unwilling to confront. And still, you doubt yourself. You wonder if you're being dramatic, if you're overreacting, if maybe you are too emotional. But this self-doubt is exactly what their passive envy feeds on. The empath becomes isolated not through loud rejection, but through quiet neglect, being excluded from conversations, being met with lukewarm reactions to moments of success, being given silence where there should have been applause. And the more awakened you become, the more clearly you see it. The more you elevate spiritually, the more their subtle betrayals reveal themselves not as misunderstandings, but as signs of emotional immaturity and spiritual avoidance. You were not born to make others comfortable. You were born to be the fire that exposes what needs to be transformed. Your sensitivity is not a weakness. It is divine intelligence. Your emotions are not unstable. They are spiritual wisdom. And your energy doesn't just exist. It speaks. It illuminates. It unmasks. So when someone resents you without reason, when their affection feels laced with something colder, know this: you are not the problem. You are the mirror. And what they see in you is a reflection of what they've denied in themselves. Don't dim your light to soothe their shadows. Don't shrink your truth so others don't feel exposed. And don't apologize for being a soul that sees too clearly in a world addicted to pretending. Your energy unmasks their lies, not to hurt them, but to heal them. Whether they choose to face that or not is not your responsibility. Your only responsibility is to keep growing, to keep shining, and to never abandon your inner knowing for external approval. 4. The archetype of the wounded healer. Empaths often embody the spiritual archetype of the wounded healer, those who have been broken, bruised, and burned by life. Yet instead of shutting down, They rise with a deep soul-level commitment to help others rise too. Their gift is not just emotional sensitivity. It is the ability to feel pain, transmute it, and turn it into light. But that light, as beautiful as it is, becomes a beacon for the emotionally immature, the energetically hungry, and those who see the empath's warmth not as sacred, but as something to consume. These people don't see the healer's wounds, nor do they care to acknowledge the silent strength it takes to hold others while still learning how to hold themselves. Instead, they take and take, often wrapped in masks of affection, admiration, or need, slowly draining the empath's life force under the guise of closeness. What they truly envy is not your kindness, but your inner glow, your ability to stay soft in a world that tried to make you hard. Carl Jung warned us that envy is the unconscious homage that mediocrity pays to genius. And in the life of the empath, envy often hides behind smiles and false praise. It is rarely spoken aloud, but you can feel it in the sharpness of their silence, the sudden coldness in the room when you succeed, the passive-aggressive comments cloaked in concern. They resent that your energy heals without effort, that your presence calms storms they haven't learned how to face within themselves. They may not say it, but deep down, they can't understand how someone who's been through so much can still radiate light. And because they don't understand it, they label it, project onto it, or attempt to control it. This is the spiritual battlefield that empaths quietly walk every day. Your spiritual awakening becomes a threat to those still asleep in their patterns. Your boundaries become offensive to those who benefited from your lack of them. And your decision to protect your peace will be misunderstood by those who only knew how to relate to your pain. In everyday life, this plays out subtly and consistently. People come to you when their world is falling apart, but they disappear when yours begins to shake. They call you strong when you're silent, but selfish when you finally speak up. They praise your wisdom, but reject your truth when it doesn't cater to their comfort. This is why empaths must evolve beyond being available. Spirituality is not servitude. Spiritual growth is not about allowing yourself to be emptied over and over again to prove your worth. It's about recognizing that you were never meant to be a constant healer for those who refuse to heal themselves. You are not a crutch for their emotional avoidance. You are a mirror one that reflects both their potential and their resistance. And that reflection can feel like a threat to someone who is still addicted to their own illusions. The path forward for the wounded healer is not martyrdom, but sovereignty. It's understanding that you are not here to be consumed. You are here to be conscious. You are not a lifeboat for those who refuse to swim. You are the lighthouse, shining not because others need saving, but because you were born to glow. Spiritual wisdom demands that you no longer betray yourself just to keep the peace. Your energy, your clarity, your boundaries are sacred. And the more you honor them, the more you step into your highest self. Let those who are meant for your frequency rise to meet you. Let the rest be unmasked by the purity of your presence. 5. False love is an energetic vampireism. False love is not affection. It is energetic theft, wearing the mask of intimacy. Many empaths walk into relationships that look full of promise, only to find themselves emotionally starved. It's like a dream banquet, where everything appears abundant, but every bite turns to ash. These relationships don't feed your soul, they feed off it. The so-called lover doesn't love you. They extract from you. They crave your emotional depth, your kindness, your healing presence. But deep down, they also resent you for it. As Carl Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And that's the exact thing they haven't done. So when you arrive with self-awareness and emotional depth, your very being becomes a mirror to everything they've refused to face within themselves. They say they love you, but what they really love is your light until it reveals their shadow. Your energy begins to unmask their lies, not by accusation, but simply by existing in truth. You don't have to say a word. Your presence speaks louder than their performance. This triggers something ancient in them, a wound they never healed. They start to envy you. And envy, unlike desire, does not want what you have. It wants you to lose it. They smile, but secretly compete, support, but quietly sabotage. Your empathy becomes a burden in these dynamics because you keep feeling sorry for the one who's draining you. You try to fix them, uplift them, stay longer hoping they'll see your heart. But they already do, and it terrifies them. Carl Jung taught that envy is a shadow projected outward. What they hate in you is what they've rejected in themselves: openness, vulnerability, integrity, and soul. They can't receive your love fully because they don't love themselves yet. Instead, they manipulate, guilt trip, withdraw affection, and make you question your worth. This isn't romance, it's spiritual erosion. Empaths often confuse spiritual warfare for spiritual connection because they feel everything so deeply. You think this intensity must mean something sacred, when in truth, it's just chaos cloaked in chemistry. You're not in love, you're in survival. If you're constantly exhausted, doubting your intuition, and explaining your existence to someone who never truly sees you, then you're not growing, you're shrinking. And the person who claims to love you may actually resent your light because it exposes their darkness. This isn't just emotional manipulation, it's energetic vampireism. And your intelligence and spiritual wisdom knows it before your mind does. That gut feeling, that sudden drop in energy when you're around them, that's not paranoia. That's your soul saying, get out. You were not born to be someone's emotional bandage. Your energy is sacred. It is the frequency of truth in a world addicted to illusion. Real love will never make you shrink. Real love doesn't ask you to dim. It celebrates you, expands you, protects you. So when someone starts competing with your peace, resenting your calm, or punishing your clarity, believe what your energy is telling you. Because your spiritual awakening didn't come to make you lovable to others, it came to make you unshakable in your own light. 6. Dreams as warnings from the psyche. Empaths don't just dream, they receive encrypted messages from the soul. When you see yourself drowning, being hunted, or handed an empty gift, that's not just a random nightmare. That's your psyche raising a red flag. In the language of Carl Jung, these are symbols from the unconscious, alerting you to a deeper betrayal. What appears as love is actually spiritual theft. You sense it, but can't always explain it. That's the tragedy and the genius of the empathic spirit. You feel the truth before you can name it. These dreams are not accidents. Drowning reflects emotional overwhelm caused by someone projecting their unresolved pain onto you. Being chased mirrors the psychological tension of constantly dodging emotional manipulation. or pressure to conform. And the empty gift. It's the clearest symbol of all. The illusion of support that disguises envy, wrapped in a smile but hollow at the core. The truth is, empaths live with an open channel to spiritual intelligence, and that makes them both radiant and triggering to others. People who secretly envy you may present themselves as caretakers, friends, even lovers. But their affection is conditional, rooted not in love, but in control. They don't want you to rise. They want access to your light. The more you evolve spiritually, the more their discomfort grows, because your growth unmasks their stagnation. You don't need to confront them to feel this. Your dreams do it for you. The subconscious doesn't lie. In the dream realm, the soul whispers what the ego ignores. And when you're spiritually awake, even sleep becomes a battlefield of truth. Spiritual development sharpens this inner knowing. It's not just about becoming more compassionate, it's about becoming more discerning. As you deepen your own awareness, you start to notice the difference between someone who truly supports your expansion and someone who subtly undermines it. Jung reminds us that envy isn't admiration gone wrong. It's resentment, masked as affection. That's why your nervous system tightens around certain people. Why you feel drained after conversations that seemed harmless. Why you smile through interactions that leave you hollow. These aren't just personality conflicts. They're energy warnings. You must begin to honor these subtle shifts as sacred data. Your body knows. Your dreams know. The only question is, will you listen? Emotional vampirism thrives in silence when you ignore your inner signals to keep the peace, to avoid judgment, or because the betrayal doesn't come with sharp teeth. But once you start trusting your energy above their words, the fog lifts. You no longer second-guess your intuition. You walk away, not with rage, but with clarity. That is the mark of true spiritual maturity, knowing that not everyone who loves you is safe for your spirit. So when the dream returns, when you're drowning again, being chased again, holding the empty gift again, don't dismiss it. Decode it. Ask yourself, who in your life is offering less than they claim? Who benefits from your openness but cannot celebrate your light? Who masks envy as loyalty? The answer won't come through logic. It will rise through the body, through the symbols, through the stillness. That is the realm where empaths thrive, not just in feeling everything, but in interpreting it with wisdom. Because the path of spirituality is not to escape the world. It's to see it clearly, feel it honestly, and protect your soul fiercely. 7. Projection. Envy's psychological root. There is a silent war envy wages, and it always begins with projection. Instead of confronting their inner wounds, those who are envious cast their pain onto others, turning their shame into accusations. When you walk as an empath, someone deeply attuned to emotion, intuition, and subtle energies, you naturally become a mirror. And not everyone is ready to see their own reflection. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But those unwilling to take responsibility for their shadow will instead aim to make you the problem. They'll call you fragile when it is they who can't regulate their emotions. They'll say you're unstable when it is their identity that is crumbling behind the mask. They'll accuse you of being too emotional because they've never developed the courage to feel their own grief, rage, or longing. Envy doesn't admire or simply desire, it resents. And resentment, when left unchecked, distorts the truth. It fabricates a narrative where your light becomes the threat and their darkness becomes justified. In this inversion of truth, the empath becomes the villain in their story, not because of what they've done, but because of what they embody: spiritual clarity, emotional depth, and authenticity. The empath, in their stillness, disrupts the false peace of those who live in denial. Your very presence threatens the illusion. And because they cannot control or become what you are, they attempt to redefine you through blame, gossip, mockery, or psychological manipulation. But what they attack is not your weakness. It is your strength, your ability to stay soft in a hard world, your gift of spiritual awareness in a culture that rewards emotional numbness. In their eyes, you are too much, but only because you are not pretending to be less. That triggers a deep and unconscious truth within them, that you are living in alignment with something they have betrayed within themselves. So the projection becomes a form of punishment, an emotional redirection to silence the mirror and avoid awakening. This is why spiritual awakening requires boundaries. Your energy is sacred, and not everyone deserves access to it. To protect your peace is not arrogance, it is wisdom. You are not here to absorb the shame of those who refuse to face their wounds. You are not responsible for the stories they invent to avoid transformation. The more you rise in self-awareness, the more visible you become to those still trapped in self-deception. Let their envy reveal their suffering, not your identity. Let their rejection become redirection back to your own center. Do not shrink. Do not explain. Do not betray your intuition just to make someone else feel comfortable in their illusions. They say you are sensitive, but what they mean is, you make me feel things I've buried. They say you're dramatic, but what they mean is, your truth is louder than my lie. And they say you are unstable, but what they mean is, your presence exposes how disconnected I've become. So let your energy continue to unmask what is false, not through confrontation, but by remaining true to yourself. In a world addicted to projection, your self-awareness is rebellion. In a world drowning in image, your authenticity is a revolution. And in a world where envy seeks to distort the light, your spiritual wisdom becomes the one thing they cannot touch. 8. Spiritual alchemy and the shado. You are not just a presence in the room. You are a mirror that reveals what others try to bury within themselves. Carl Jung called this the negredo, the dark night of the soul, the necessary chaos before rebirth, and you, unknowingly, bring others to that edge. As an empath, your emotional and spiritual intelligence naturally pierces through illusions, and in doing so, you disturb the shadow others have spent their entire lives avoiding. Not through confrontation, but simply by being real in a world built on performance. Your energy unmasks the lies they tell themselves, and in their discomfort, they blame you. They don't want your truth. They want your silence. But your very existence activates their reckoning. They project, not because you've done harm, but because your light reminds them of their own darkness. You trigger what they fear: transformation. Envy doesn't always scream. Often, it hides behind compliments, subtle jabs, or the forced smiles of those who claim to love you. It doesn't want what you have. It wants you not to have it. It doesn't admire. It resents. Your radiance feels like exposure, your clarity like confrontation. They sense your alignment, and instead of rising to meet their own, they fall into comparison. This is where your role becomes both powerful and painful. You become the emotional dumping ground for those too afraid to face themselves. They don't realize that your spiritual wisdom comes from surviving the very shadows they now deny. You have walked through emotional fires and alchemized them into light, and that light reveals their wounds. Carl Jung warned, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." And so, they resist you, hoping the truth will vanish if the mirror disappears. You internalize this. You question your worth. You wonder why love feels like rejection and why kindness is often returned with cruelty. But this is not a flaw in you. It is your function. You are the awakener, the soul disruptor, the spark that catalyzes the unseen. In a society that rewards numbness and detachment, your empathy is an act of defiance. While others shut down to survive, you open up to transmute. Your spiritual awakening is not a personal event. It is a ripple effect. Every time you hold space for truth, even silently, you unravel the collective illusion. You are not here to fix them. You are not here to shrink. You are here to stand in your own frequency, even when it unsettles the room. Especially then. This is alchemy. This is why your energy both attracts and repels. You are not too much. You are exactly the medicine some people are not ready to take. You do not have to defend your intuition, explain your knowledge, or dull your vibration. Your presence is the initiation they didn't ask for, and their discomfort is not your responsibility. In Jung's spiritual framework, this is sacred tension, the friction between shadow and soul. You are not the villain in their story. You are the threshold. So trust your sensitivity, protect your light, and understand this. To walk with this kind of awareness is not weakness. It is power in its highest, most intelligent form. 9. Individuation as the path to freedom. Individuation is not just a concept. It is the key to your emotional and spiritual freedom. It's the moment when you, as an empath, stop believing that your sensitivity is a curse and start honoring it as a sacred calling. It is the inner transformation where your deepest wound becomes your deepest wisdom. You've been conditioned to overextend, to offer your light without limit, to carry what isn't yours just to keep the peace. But peace built on self-betrayal is not peace. It's spiritual erosion. Boundaries are not barriers. They are bridges to the truth of who you are. They say, "I will love you, but not at the cost of abandoning myself." Choosing when to give rather than giving compulsively is not coldness, it is clarity. Because when giving is driven by compulsion, it is no longer an act of love. It becomes an act of survival, rooted in fear, guilt, or the need to be needed. And that cycle is the very thing individuation breaks. Carl Jung taught that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And that journey requires more than healing, it requires remembering. It asks you to stop being a mirror for other people's projections and to start becoming the mirror of your own soul. Spirituality, in its highest form, is not about being endlessly accommodating. It's about knowing where your energy ends and where another's begins. It's about spiritual development through discernment, seeing through the false masks of those who smile with envy hidden behind their eyes. When you protect your light unapologetically, you don't become hard, you become clear. You don't lose compassion, you gain wisdom. You begin to realize that love without boundaries is not love, it's a performance. You were not born to be the emotional sponge of the world. You were born to illuminate, to awaken, to challenge what is false by the simple truth of your being. And that truth becomes powerful the moment you stop shrinking. Stop dimming. Stop apologizing. Your sensitivity is not a liability. It is an antenna for truth. But only when paired with boundaries does it become a force of spiritual evolution. There is no virtue in sacrificing your well-being to prove your loyalty. There is no glory in rescuing others while you drown. True empathy involves saying no. It involves stepping back. It involves choosing solitude over toxicity. And that choice is not cruel, it's conscious. So you set boundaries, not to push people away, but to honor the sacred space where your soul can finally breathe. You refuse to carry another's shadow, not because you lack compassion, but because you respect the law of spiritual responsibility. You protect your light not from arrogance, but from understanding. And you choose when to give, because you now give from wholeness, not from a wound. That is individuation. That is spiritual development. That is how your energy stops being used and starts becoming sacred. 10. Transformation. From wounded to sovereign empath. There comes a moment in every empath's spiritual awakening where the veil lifts not from the world, but from their own eyes. You stop mistaking intensity for intimacy, drama for depth, and most painfully, envy for love. Envy is a spiritual parasite dressed as devotion. And for the empath, it often hides behind the smiles of those who say they adore you, but are secretly drained by your light. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But for the empath, it's even more terrifying to realize that others do not accept you. They envy the parts of you they cannot control. When you are spiritually intelligent and deeply attuned, you can feel the distortion beneath the surface. But your soul, desperate for connection, often chooses to look the other way. Until one day, the truth becomes louder than the illusion. This is when you rise. This is the sacred threshold where the empath becomes sovereign, the one who loves without losing themselves, who sees clearly without self-betrayal, who stops shrinking to be palatable and starts standing tall in truth. The sovereign empath is not cold. They are crystalline. They no longer mistake chaos for chemistry. They recognize when energy is manipulative and when it is mutual. They no longer offer their healing to those who refuse to heal. They stop apologizing for their sensitivity and start honoring it as a spiritual superpower. Instead of lowering their frequency to keep others comfortable, they now radiate with unapologetic clarity. They know that some people do not want healing. They want attention, control, or access to your light without ever earning your trust. Your energy becomes the ultimate lie detector. It unravels projection. It exposes pretense. And when your energy becomes that clear, it will unmask the envy hidden in compliments, the resentment behind help, and the competition cloaked as closeness. You begin to walk with sacred solitude instead of emotional dependency. You no longer chase being understood. You become a mirror of truth, and only those who are ready for their own reflection will stay. You stop attracting love that drains and begin magnetizing love that amplifies. You no longer accept half-hearted affection or performative loyalty. You wait for the sacred, the aligned, the true. This is not just healing, it's remembrance. You are not here to be consumed. You are here to be witnessed, honored, and loved in your fullness. The sovereign empath turns wounds into wisdom, betrayal into boundaries, and isolation into inner authority. This isn't personal growth. It's a spiritual revolution. And if you are walking this path, know this: you are not alone. You are a pattern breaker, a truth bearer, a silent warrior. You chose to feel it all so that the future wouldn't have to live in numbness. That is not a weakness. That is divine intelligence. That is spiritual wisdom. And that, beloved, is your becoming. 11. True love is not envious. True love nourishes your spirit rather than depleting it. It rejoices in your light instead of resenting it, and it encourages your wholeness, never demanding your sacrifice. It is not threatened by your growth, but inspired by it. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And in the context of love, this means being with someone who supports your becoming rather than suppressing it. Yet for many empaths, love has long been confused with endurance. The more pain they tolerate, the more loyal they believe they are. But that is not loyalty. That is spiritual amnesia. Envy is the silent toxin that hides behind smiles and sweet words, yet its energy betrays its intentions. It does not seek to elevate you, but to contain you. It cannot celebrate your joy because it secretly fears that your joy invalidates its own story. When you are an empath, deeply sensitive to the emotional undercurrents around you, you may feel this contradiction without understanding it, why someone who claims to love you always seems uncomfortable when you shine. The answer lies in their unconscious resentment, in their refusal to confront their own inner emptiness, which your light exposes. This is where spiritual wisdom becomes your protection. To awaken is to see clearly, not just with your eyes, but with your soul. When you stop confusing self-sacrifice for love, you no longer allow others to consume your energy to validate their illusions. You stop playing the role of the emotional savior and instead step into the truth of your being whole, worthy, and enough. Jung warned, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The moment you recognize that you were never meant to dim your brilliance for anyone's comfort is the moment you reclaim your power. When you rise into this level of consciousness, you attract those who are not intimidated by your intelligence or radiance. Instead of resenting your growth, they are inspired by it. You no longer beg for love in places that require your silence to stay. You no longer confuse toxicity with passion. You begin to understand that real love feels like peace, not chaos, not confusion, not compromise at the cost of your soul. It feels like alignment, like coming home to yourself without apology. And when you honor this truth, you become a beacon not for those who need to be healed by your light, but for those who can walk beside it in truth, in reverence, and in love. 12. The final truth. They didn't envy your money, your appearance, or even your accomplishments. They envied your depth, your presence, your emotional wisdom. Carl Jung reminded us, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And when someone envies you, it's rarely about what you have. It's about what you are. Your emotional clarity, your spiritual development, your calm, steady energy disrupts the illusions others have built for themselves. You feel everything. You walk into a room, and your nervous system starts reading the atmosphere like sonar. Who's anxious? Who's insecure? Who's pretending to be fine? And that's not a curse. That's your gift. But gifts like yours are misunderstood by those who've spent a lifetime running from their own truth. When people haven't faced their own emotions, your ability to feel becomes threatening. When they haven't cultivated inner peace, your presence feels like confrontation. Not because you are unkind, but because you reflect a standard they've abandoned. You don't have to speak a word. Your energy reveals what they're hiding. And that's where envy begins, not as a compliment, but as a psychological rejection of what they fear they'll never become. You are the mirror, and not everyone is ready to see their own reflection. Some people react with admiration, but others react with resentment, because your authenticity reminds them of their inauthenticity. Your groundedness reveals their chaos. Your calmness becomes unbearable to those addicted to noise. That's why spiritual clarity is disruptive. Empaths don't just feel emotions. They awaken emotions in others that have long been buried. And instead of taking responsibility for their feelings, some people will blame you for awakening them. That is not your fault. Your power is not the problem. The real problem is that the world has not been taught how to love people who see clearly. But you are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to live with integrity, to honor your sensitivity as strength, and to protect your peace like sacred fire. Spirituality without boundaries invites burnout. Compassion without discernment turns into energetic leakage. You are not too much. You are not broken. You are not too sensitive. You are a fully awake soul in a world still hitting snooze. And the sooner you accept that your presence will disturb those who have not yet met themselves, the freer you become. You don't owe anyone your silence just to keep their illusions intact. You don't have to shrink so others feel tall. The purpose of your spiritual development is not to dim your light, but to learn how to hold it in a way that doesn't burn you out. Your light isn't a performance, it's a frequency. And it's okay if not everyone is tuned in. Let that be your clarity, not your shame. What others can't handle in you is often the very thing you were born to carry. That's not ego. That's a sacred responsibility. You don't have to be less. You just have to be whole. So stay steady. Keep shining. And when your energy unmasks their lies, don't explain. Just keep walking in truth. If this message stirred something deep within you, know that your energy is your truth, and truth has a way of revealing everything that is false. In a world full of masks, your authenticity is revolutionary. Thank you for walking this path of spiritual wisdom with us. If you found this video meaningful, please like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our next awakening. Until next time, stay radiant and trust the wisdom within your soul. 6 powerful reasons why the INFJ is neurodivergent. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Carl Jung. Have you ever felt like your mind works in ways others can't quite understand? If so, you're not alone, and you might just be among the rare 1% known as the INFJ. In today's video on spiritual wisdom, we explore 6 powerful reasons why INFJs are not just rare, but profoundly neurodivergent, wired for deep perception, heightened intuition, and visionary insight. Carl Jung believed that true individuality often sets us apart from the world, and in this case, being different may just be your greatest gift. As you watch, reflect on how your unique way of thinking might be the very path to your personal growth and happiness. Have you ever felt misunderstood for your sensitivity or depth? Share your experience in the comments below. We want to hear your voice. 1. Unique cognitive processing. INFJs process the world through introverted intuition, a nonlinear, unconscious system that gathers subtle details, patterns, and emotional currents beneath the surface of daily life. Unlike linear thinkers who seek answers through logic or step-by-step analysis, INFJs allow insights to rise organically from deep within. These insights seem to arrive out of nowhere, but in truth, they are the product of a mind constantly weaving together meaning behind the scenes. This cognitive style mirrors traits seen in certain neurodivergent profiles, like autism and ADHD, not because INFJs are disordered, but because their minds are designed to move through the world differently, with spiritual intelligence and profound emotional resonance. Their silence isn't absence, it's processing. Their distance isn't apathy, it's observation. And their deep, layered reflections aren't confusion. They're a form of wisdom that defies the surface. Carl Jung understood this deeply, naming intuition as a central function in his psychological types, and reminding us that what society deems irrational may be the very source of higher knowing. INFJs don't just interpret life, they feel it before it unfolds. Their inner world is filled with symbolism, metaphor, and emotional truth that often precedes logic. They live in a constant dance between the subconscious and the superconscious, navigating life not by facts alone, but by spiritual resonance. In a world that moves fast and praises shallow clarity, this can make them feel alien. But that alienation is the signal they are meant to move differently, to offer perspectives that challenge conventional rhythms and awaken unseen truths. In daily life, this often looks like absorbing emotional energy without words, recognizing patterns in human behavior before others notice, and experiencing sudden revelations that feel more like downloads than thoughts. These aren't accidents. They're signs of an inner coherence that transcends ordinary cognition. INFJs can sense future outcomes, intuit hidden motives, and hold space for emotional healing in a way that can only be described as sacred. This isn't just sensitivity, it's a rare form of spiritual intelligence. Their neurodivergence is not a condition, it's a calling. When others are confused by chaos, INFJs often see the deeper meaning. When others avoid pain, INFJs find purpose through it. They are wired for transformation. In the landscape of spiritual awakening, INFJs often serve as unconscious guides. They walk the edge between worlds, the logical and the symbolic, the seen and the unseen, the now and the not yet. They are not here to fit in, but to realign the collective by simply being what they are. Deeply feeling, profoundly perceptive, and unapologetically nonlinear. Their minds do not move in straight lines because their purpose is not confined to the known. It is to remind us that healing doesn't always look like a diagnosis. It sometimes looks like a different kind of mind, born to interpret the soul. Comment below. I think differently, and that's my power. If you resonate with the unique way INFJs process the world around them. 2. Heightened sensory sensitivity. INFJs experience the world through a finely tuned nervous system that responds with extraordinary intensity to both physical and emotional stimuli. Loud noises can feel invasive, bright lights can cause discomfort, and even the scent of a strong perfume or the chaos of a cluttered room can feel suffocating. This heightened sensory awareness is not a weakness or a personal preference. It's a neurological reality that aligns closely with sensory processing sensitivity, a recognized trait within the neurodivergent spectrum. But what sets the INFJ apart is not just their sensitivity to the outer world, but their deep internal processing of it. Carl Jung recognized the INFJ's dominant function of introverted intuition as a spiritual radar, constantly scanning for deeper patterns, meanings, and emotional resonance in every encounter. When an INFJ withdraws from social gatherings, avoids overstimulating environments, or seeks solitude, it is not antisocial behavior. It is necessary, energetic regulation. The world is too loud for their spiritual frequency. They don't just see people, they feel them. They don't just hear words, they absorb intention. And when the environment is too much, too fast, too loud, too chaotic, they retreat not to escape, but to return to coherence. This trait is not merely neurological, it is deeply spiritual. INFJs are often drawn toward practices like mindfulness, breathwork, journaling, or solitude, not because they are trendy, but because they are survival tools. These rituals are sacred recalibrations, ways of restoring their energetic field after being in contact with overwhelming stimuli. In a world obsessed with productivity and performance, their nervous system demands purpose and presence. What others overlook, INFJs intuitively decode. A simple facial expression, a shift in energy, or an unspoken word can carry entire emotional stories. This makes them both spiritually gifted and emotionally exhausted. Their sensory system is not just responding, it's reading, interpreting, translating, feeling, and then processing it all on a soul level. And that's why their lives require more silence, more space, more spiritual boundaries. Without these, INFJs burn out. Their need for order, clarity, and beauty isn't about aesthetics. It's about survival in a world that often feels too loud for their depth. To thrive, they must design lives that honor their internal rhythm, not suppress it. Spiritual development for the INFJ begins when they stop apologizing for their sensitivity and start treating it like the superpower it is. When they learn to filter not just sounds and smells, but also energies and emotions, they become alchemists of human experience. Their path isn't about fitting into a chaotic world. It's about showing that depth, presence, and attunement to subtle realities are not only valid, but vital. So if you feel things deeply, if you need more silence than others, if the noise of the world makes you feel fractured, you are not broken. You are attuned to a different frequency. Honor it. Your spiritual growth begins where your nervous system feels safe enough to open. Sensory sensitivity isn't a curse. It's a compass pointing you back to the truth of who you are. Don't forget to subscribe for more wisdom on how heightened sensitivity can be a gift, not a glitch in a world that often misunderstands your depth. 3. Deep empathy and emotional intensity. INFJs don't just understand emotions, they absorb them with a depth that defies logic, often feeling the weight of someone else's sadness before a word is spoken. Their empathy isn't surface level, it's cellular. They carry the emotional frequencies of others within their own nervous systems, which means they don't just witness pain, they become it. This intense emotional tracking system isn't a personality quirk. It's a neurodivergent trait, rooted in heightened sensory sensitivity and deep intuitive processing. Carl Jung, who first introduced this rare personality type, believed that the most awakened individuals are those who courageously explore their inner world. INFJs live in that inner world constantly. When you speak to them, they don't just hear you, they feel you. And when they watch a film, hear a song, or read a story, they don't consume it passively. They're spiritually transported into its emotional landscape. This emotional absorption often mirrors traits seen in highly sensitive persons, HSPs, and those on the autism spectrum, who experience stimuli, especially emotional stimuli, with profound intensity. Because of this, INFJs often find the world overwhelming. While others can brush off negativity, they internalize it, often without even realizing they've done so. They may feel exhausted after social gatherings, not because they're shy, but because their minds and hearts have been flooded with unspoken emotional data. They are constantly decoding tone, energy, and micro-expressions, sometimes even sensing things the speaker hasn't consciously admitted. This kind of intuitive overload leads them to seek solitude not as a form of escape, but as a sacred practice of emotional purification. INFJs need solitude the way others need sleep. Without it, their nervous system short-circuits under the weight of collective energy. And yet, their emotional depth is not a flaw. It's a manifestation of spiritual wisdom in action. They are wired to care, to sense, to feel beyond the veil. But in a world that worships emotional numbness and celebrates superficial connections, such sensitivity is often misunderstood or dismissed as weakness. The truth is, INFJs function on a frequency that doesn't match the noise of modern life. Their brains are wired for pattern recognition, symbolic meaning, and moral coherence. They don't just want to understand the what, they crave the why. And this makes their emotional responses more complex, layered, and existential. It's why they can feel joy and sorrow simultaneously, why they cry during moments of beauty, and why they sometimes retreat into silence when there's too much to process. INFJs are emotional alchemists, turning pain into compassion, chaos into clarity. But this gift comes with a cost. It requires boundaries. It demands rest. It calls for environments that support, not exploit, their rare vibration. Their emotional intensity is a form of spiritual intelligence, a sign that they're not just surviving this world. They're feeling it, healing it, and carrying it, one vibration at a time. Are you someone who feels the emotions of others so deeply it sometimes feels like your own heart is speaking for the world? If yes, comment below. I feel deeply, but I remain grounded. Let this be your reminder that your empathy is not a weakness. It's your superpower, and you have the inner strength to channel it with wisdom. 4. Preference for solitude and deep focus. While all introverts need alone time, INFJs depend on solitude not as a preference, but as a neurological and spiritual necessity. Their minds absorb stimuli like sponges every glance, tone, or unspoken emotion, and without intentional periods of withdrawal, their systems begin to short-circuit. In many ways, their experience reflects that of neurodivergent individuals whose nervous systems process the world with heightened sensitivity, requiring low stimulation environments just to maintain equilibrium. This is not just introversion, it is an energetic reality. INFJs often find themselves overstimulated in social settings, not because they dislike people, but because every interaction, is processed on multiple levels: emotionally, intellectually, intuitively, and energetically. A simple conversation becomes a data stream of hidden meanings, micro-expressions, energetic shifts, and emotional undercurrents. Their brain, like an intricate web of insight, needs time to sort and interpret what others often bypass. Without solitude, they experience what spiritual psychology calls fragmentation, where the self loses coherence under the pressure of external input. Solitude becomes their sanctuary, their sacred ground for integration, where they can realign with their inner voice, recover their frequency, and make sense of the chaos. This need for deep focus mirrors the state of spiritual awakening, where silence becomes not emptiness, but presence, where stillness is not lack, but alignment. In solitude, INFJs engage with their subconscious minds in the way Carl Jung described as active imagination, a bridge between the conscious and unconscious, where they are not simply resting, but communing with the deeper truths of the psyche. During these solitary moments, they enter a kind of flow state, tuning into wisdom that is both ancient and futuristic, emotional yet objective, personal yet universal. In this sacred stillness, they recalibrate their energy, refocus their thoughts, and restore their inner balance. In today's noisy world, where hyperconnectivity is mistaken for purpose and being constantly on is praised as productivity, the INFJ teaches us that withdrawal is not escape, it is intelligence. Emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, energy intelligence. Their craving for solitude is a signal that their soul is downloading insight that cannot be accessed through noise or distraction. This is why so many INFJs become visionaries, counselors, healers, or writers, not because they enjoy isolation, but because isolation allows them to access depth. They are not meant to keep up with the speed of surface-level reality. They are here to slow things down, to process complexity, and to give language to the unseen. If you're an INFJ, you are not too sensitive, too intense, or too private. You are tuned to a different frequency. Your solitude is your sacred technology. And if you're not an INFJ, but you know one, love one, or lead one, understand this. When they retreat, they are not disconnecting. They are recharging. Respect that process. They will return from solitude not smaller, but brighter, more coherent, more themselves. In the stillness, they are not alone. They are communing with a deeper truth that many fear to face. And in honoring that truth, they offer the world something irreplaceable. Insight born not from reaction, but from reflection. A kind of spiritual wisdom that can only be accessed by those brave enough to walk alone. Do you feel most alive in your solitude and deepest when the world is quiet? If that's your truth, declare it in the comments. I focus in silence, and that's my power. 5. Nonlinear creative expression. INFJs embody a nonlinear creative genius that defies conventional patterns and reflects a deeper intelligence few truly comprehend. Their thoughts do not follow a straight path. They loop, spiral, dance between realities, leaping intuitively from one symbol to the next. This unique style of processing is often misunderstood in a world that glorifies structure and step-by-step logic. But in truth, it reflects a neurodivergent brilliance closely aligned with the way spiritually advanced and emotionally sensitive individuals interact with life. INFJs do not operate through mere intellect, they navigate through insight. Their mind is like an ecosystem, where memories, archetypes, dreams, and emotions all exist on the same plane, allowing them to make powerful, creative connections others would miss entirely. This is why their creations often feel timeless and spiritually charged, as if they are drawing from something beyond the five senses. In this way, INFJs share a kinship with neurodivergent minds, such as those with ADHD or dyslexia, not in limitation, but in liberation. Their best work emerges not from rigid schedules or external pressure, but from inner resonance, divine timing, and soulful alignment. They are not just artists. They are intuitives, oracles, storytellers of the unseen world. Carl Jung, whose psychological theories form the foundation of much of modern spirituality and inner work, recognized intuition as a function that taps into the collective unconscious. INFJs, with their dominant introverted intuition, often receive ideas and flashes not by deduction, but by deep energetic knowledge. They don't figure things out in a linear fashion. They recognize truth as it emerges from within. This is why they can appear scattered on the outside while experiencing profound inner clarity. Their nonlinear expression is not chaos. It is sacred order unfolding through the soul's own rhythm. When you observe an INFJ in creative flow, you're witnessing a spiritual event. Their energy is communing with something higher, pulling from a well of wisdom and symbolism to birth something entirely original. They may write a single sentence that holds the weight of 1,000 emotions, or construct a concept that shatters conventional boundaries while elevating collective consciousness. This kind of intelligence does not seek approval, it seeks meaning. And meaning for the INFJ is never manufactured. It is felt, lived, channeled, and revealed. INFJs need emotional spaciousness, silence, and sovereignty to do their best work. Their creativity is not about productivity. It is about spiritual awakening, healing, and revealing hidden truths. The world often misunderstands this, labeling their nonlinear nature as inefficiency or indecision, when in reality, they are navigating multiple timelines of perception at once. They are not just thinking, they are intuiting, integrating, and alchemizing. The gift of nonlinear expression lies in its ability to birth something that could never be accessed through logic alone. This is not just a cognitive style, it is a spiritual language. It is the language of pattern, synchronicity, myth, metaphor, and prophecy. INFJs carry a kind of creative frequency that reshapes reality through their ability to channel emotional truth into symbolic form. Whether it's through art, writing, conversation, or silence, their expression serves a higher function: to awaken, to mirror, to bring coherence to what is often unseen. Their neurodivergence is not a deviation from normalcy. It is a divine deviation from limitation. So if you're an INFJ, embrace your spirals. Follow the threads that pull you toward what others may not understand. Your nonlinear process is not something to fix. It is a sacred design, a bridge between dimensions, and a vital part of your spiritual development. What others perceive as messy is simply your soul in motion. Trust that. Your creativity is not meant to fit the world. It's meant to expand it. And that is a power very few possess. If this resonates with your soul's creative rhythm, leave a like, subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and tap the notification bell so you never miss insights like this. Type in the comments, "I express my creativity freely and fearlessly," to claim the power of your nonlinear genius. 6. Struggles with executive functioning. Despite possessing rare spiritual wisdom and high emotional intelligence, INFJs often face intense struggles with executive functioning that are frequently misunderstood. What appears on the outside as procrastination, indecision, or disorganization is actually a deep inner conflict caused by mental overload, emotional sensitivity, and a constant flood of internal dialogue. This is not about laziness. It's about the overwhelming responsibility they feel to do things with precision, meaning, and alignment. INFJs are not wired for surface-level action. They're wired for depth, which often makes linear tasks like starting something on time, organizing steps, or making rapid decisions feel paralyzing. Carl Jung once said, "Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering." And for INFJs, the suffering often comes from trying to force themselves into systems that don't honor their complexity. They battle time blindness, where the concept of time dissolves under deep emotional processing. They feel decision fatigue not because they are indecisive, but because every decision holds moral, emotional, and energetic weight. They don't just pick, they analyze the ripple effect, the energy behind it, and whether it fits into a much larger vision. This neurodivergent trait, shared with those who live with ADHD or anxiety, manifests in a way that is spiritual, psychological, and somatic all at once. When an INFJ delays something, it's not due to a lack of care. It's usually because they care too much. They are perfectionists, not out of vanity, but out of integrity. They want every word, every action, every detail to reflect something higher. But this need for meaning in everything can create a kind of paralysis, especially in a world that glorifies speed over substance. They often lose themselves in visions, feel overwhelmed by the sensory noise of life, and collapse under the weight of invisible expectations they place on themselves. Their neurodivergence isn't a flaw. It's a sacred architecture. It's a different operating system that prioritizes inner truth over external productivity. And while society may not understand why a brilliant, insightful mind struggles to make a phone call or finish a simple chore, it's important to recognize that intelligence isn't always linear and spiritual awakening doesn't always look graceful. The INFJ walks through life like a soul translator, processing layers of meaning, energy, emotion, and symbolism, often all at once. So the next time an INFJ forgets an appointment or puts off responding to a message, know that they're not avoiding life. They're negotiating their inner universe. They're trying to maintain coherence between their mind, their energy, and their soul. Carl Jung believed that only the paradox comes anywhere near to comprehending the fullness of life. And this is the paradox of the INFJ. Brilliant, yet frozen. Idealistic, yet overwhelmed. Spiritually awakened, yet mentally drained. What they need is not judgment, but rhythm. Not pressure, but space. Not correction, but understanding. Their journey isn't about becoming more functional in a traditional sense. It's about learning how to function in a way that honors their inner wiring. When they embrace this, they don't just survive. They activate a deeper intelligence that allows them to lead, to heal, to create, and to become the spiritual architects of a more conscious world. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the rare and powerful mind of the INFJ. If this video gave you insight, comfort, or clarity about your own neurodivergent experience, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who might need to hear it too. And remember, your uniqueness isn't a flaw, it's a superpower. Carl Jung was right. The INFJ mind doesn't just think differently, it is different. For more deep dives into spirituality, personality, and spiritual wisdom, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, share it, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment of awakening.